Hyrule Warriors, Age of Imprisonment. Is this game actually worth your time? Is this actually a Zelda game? Or is this just some crazy spin-off? Well, today I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know in this Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment review. This is an early access review. Now, I was actually very shocked and surprised at myself, to be honest, because when I went to the press event in Tokyo, go check out my vlog if you are interested, as I did cover a lot of games there, and I met some living legends. But I was very surprised because there were so many good games I wanted to try out, but I managed to get my partner in to this event as well. I just said she worked for my brand or company, even though I'm just a mid-sized channel. But hey, I'm a game journalist now, baby. And thank you so much, by the way, for 20,000 subscribers.
You serious?
I hope it still says 20k, but maybe it hasn't. But if it dipped a little bit, bump it back up. But honestly, it does mean absolutely everything to me. I've been working on this channel for 5 years now. And, I finally figured out what kind of content I like to make, philosophy and gaming and deep analysis, early reviews, all of this kind of stuff. And I'm just so happy to have a community now, the Wise One community, because I really do feel like most of you are objective, critical thinkers, smart. That's exactly what I want, intellectual gamers, and it's just so awesome to have this community now, finally, what I've always wanted. So thank you so much, and subscribe if you are new, by the way. I know a lot of you are here for the review and you don't care about that stuff, so let me cut straight to the chase, okay? I just had to say a little thank you to my community. But basically, this game is actually fucking awesome, which took me by surprise a lot. And like I said, because I got my partner in there, she wanted to check out this game. This was one of her most anticipated games. I do, of course, love the old Zelda games like Ocarina of Time and stuff like that, and Breath of the Wild, but I've never been massively into Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, but I can see why so many people do say it's their favorite game of all time. It is a great game. It's just not exactly, everything that I want. I'm more leaning to the side of Baldur's Gate 3 or, New Vegas or Dragon's Dogma 2, stuff like that, but I really do understand why, but I do get the appeal of the Zelda games. And when I went into the press event, okay, I thought I would try out a bunch of different games, but actually this was the game I played the most. This is what we got hands-on special access with the limited edition of the game, which is only available in Japan, by the way, where you get a bunch of extra stuff with it. But I was happy that I spent a lot of time playing this because, to my surprise, this game is actually awesome. So let's get into all of the details. But do bear in mind that this Age of Imprisonment review is based on the early access stuff, not the full game. I haven't seen all of the maps or anything like that. I only played a couple of levels and fought a couple of bosses, but I played enough to actually tell you if it's good or not. But I do hope you enjoy this Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment review. We're going to get into the positives and negatives. I'm not going to try and make this a super long video, and just get straight to the details. So let's get on with it, shall we? And before anyone asks, no, this is not a paid review or anything like that. And I only could play like 3 or 4 characters. I couldn't try out the Korok and stuff like that, so just let that be known. So the first thing that you need to know is this is actually a canon Zelda game now. Where the first spin-off kind of Hyrule Warriors game was not strictly canon, this actually fills in the story details for people who want to know about that war and, more about these characters. And that is the appeal of the, kind of Breath of the Wild franchise, if you will. Now, I would say that this actually falls in line with Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild. It's of that same vein, same art style. Now, the gameplay that you are seeing is on Switch 2. I played it hooked up to a monitor, but it's not, the best quality footage out there. But basically, what you actually do in this game is you go out, you clear objectives, and you basically kill everything in sight. This is very much an action-driven game. It's not like Breath of the Wild, if you're expecting that. It's not open world. You won't be traversing an open world or, doing climbing or anything like that, cooking. The good example, if you haven't ever played a Hyrule Warriors game, is comparing it to something like Dynasty Warriors. In fact, it is kind of a spin-off of that franchise. So basically, the reason they wanted to wait for the Switch 2 is because then they could actually add tons of enemies on screen. The Switch 1 obviously wasn't capable. So my first positive is now that it is all part of the same universe. It is all canon, and it does truly feel like one of the Breath of the Wild games. Like I said, with its art design, with the equipment, everything about this game feels like you're playing just an alternate version of that game with a focus more focus on combat and combinations and all of this kind of stuff. So that is the first positive. The second positive is, of course, the combat. The combat in this is fantastic. It's very snappy. It's very responsive. You have all of these different abilities, combinations. Like I said, the best comparison would be to something like Dynasty Warriors, at times almost like a character action game. Now, obviously, this isn't Ninja Gaiden over here or Devil May Cry, but it does have that kind of flow state to it with its combat, which does feel really good to pull off with all of these different combinations, group abilities where you kind of sync up with different characters and do massive AoE damage attacks, stuff like that. And it's very satisfying, and each character plays differently. So you can have someone be more of the tank, Zelda is more of the mage, good for like kind of long range, kind of spell damage and all that kind of stuff. And then you get these crazy abilities. So what I really like about this game is each character feels different and has their own playstyle to master. And then when you do group attacks, like you actually have to focus and control the power of your attacks, so it's actually hitting the correct target. So there is, actual skill involved to a degree. It's not just, watch a cutscene happen. Stuff like that really adds to it, I think, instead of just doing, quick time events or anything like that. Obviously, it does kind of feel like sometimes the combat is doing, itself, because it's one of those games where when you get into a flow state and when you kind of are triggering, these abilities, a lot of them don't have a cooldown and they just kind of, are spammy. But that is the name of the game because you are usually fighting huge amounts of enemies. But when you do need to focus and you want to be more deliberate with your attacks, it does allow for that, especially with these grouping up abilities and stuff like that. And like I said, you can go from Zelda, more of a mage, to a tank, to literally riding on, these crazy Tears of the Kingdom, machines, and then just mowing people down using stuff like that. You can even have access to things like flamethrowers, thanks to the ancient machinery of this world. So you can't actually build it like in Tears of the Kingdom, but you do prep before battle and, choose equipment which will actually buff your abilities and stuff like that. Now, the next point I want to highlight, which is kind of a mixed point, not a positive or a negative, but, you can't expect, exploration. Like I said, it is an action-driven game. It's not, an exploration open-world game like the other two games, but it does still feel very Zelda, and it has a lot of story elements in there, which I'm sure die-hard fans are going to be happy about. But to me, the map is actually quite interesting because think of it as these massive dungeons, okay? And basically it actually feeds into each other to get to the main objective. But if you go off the beaten path, you can actually find, a mini boss or something like that. And bosses in this game is where it's super cool because the bosses are the most fun. You get to see lots of unique looking enemies that you haven't seen in the other Zelda games, and then you have to worry about fighting off the mob as well. And the bosses actually put up a bit of a challenge, honestly. And, I just like how they're designed. And, you can discover a different boss if you go down a different route compared to somewhere else. And honestly, the way the bosses are designed and, the different mechanics to beat them, you could say some of them are gimmick bosses, but a lot of them are just, the traditional skill-focused bosses. And I do like that there are optional bosses. And, you just get to see more of this universe that I know a lot of people are excited about, even if it is through an action lens. But honestly, the action here is so fun. I was actually taken by surprise, by not being a huge, massive Zelda fan. The combat here was a lot of fun, and I actually think it's better than Dynasty Warriors, surprisingly. Now, the nice thing is you are always on the move.
Always on the move.
Okay, and you can actually switch up characters at any point during, the actual level itself. You don't have to choose one and then you're stuck with that character, which I like. All of them level up differently, and there is some nice story, kind of chill moments to help catch your breath. And there's actually surprisingly a lot of story here, a lot of cutscenes. They are really focusing on, making this part of the franchise now, making it canon. That's the big thing here. So if you do like the action in Zelda, but you want even more kind of old school character combo action instead of the, more tactical, slow natured combat of Tears of the Kingdom with, the parries and, hiding behind a shield, or that classic Zelda Tears of the Kingdom combat where you have to jump out of the way and then it slows down time so then you can get in your attacks. I think you're going to like that because it's basically almost that combat, but then built up way more with character action, but it does still have some of those elements in there, like that slow down time ability, getting out of the way and choosing your different abilities, but much more like Dynasty Warriors, and then with these endless bosses. But it just surprised me with how many cutscenes there were and how much of a story that they're actually trying to build up here. The progression is very stripped back, but it doesn't need to be complicated because you are playing around with many different characters, and there's so many different abilities on offer here, and items to use as well, which actually change up the gameplay a lot. So there you go, my wise ones. That is my Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment review based on all of the early access that I could play at Tokyo Game Show, the press event. I think Age of Imprisonment reviews are going to perform pretty well, honestly, because it builds on the story. The combat is super tight, better than Dynasty Warriors in my opinion, and it's got co-op elements, and it's utilizing the Switch too. Even if the graphics aren't amazing, the amount of things happening on screen with good FPS is what really took me by surprise, and just how fun the combat is. So I think this is going to do well. Even if you're not a huge Zelda fan, you might just like this for the co-op aspect, for the combat, but for Zelda, die-hard fans, this is definitely a must-play, I would say. Otherwise, of course, skip this, because if you're not really into Zelda, then, this isn't doing something, drastically new that we haven't seen done in other games, but it just does it very well. So there you go, that is my Age of Imprisonment review. I do hope you enjoyed this one. Like the video if you did, that really does mean a lot. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Look after yourselves, have a great day, peace out.